Give them another round, everybody. We've got to encourage each other. We've got to push each other. Speaking of pushing, speaking of being heard, speaking of fighting, speaking of creating a little bit of good trouble. Okay, we've got the family here of John Lewis. We have Jarek, we have Gary, we have Angela. They're going to be joining us on stage. Show them some love. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us. I'm Angela Lewis Warren. These are my cousins. This is Jared, and this is Gary, which he already introduced to you. We want to say, keep marching. 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 Keep marching.
Don't stand still. Don't let them snatch your voice. Use your pen. Use your legs. Walk. Move, speak, and keep his legacy alive. Not just his legacy, everybody that has been beaten, bruised, and died, so that we may have the ability to vote. Don't allow them to take our rights away from us. Don't allow them to silence us. Keep marching. Keep marching. They must pass this bill. It is a must. It is necessary. It is not a choice. We will not lay down. We will not stay silent. We will not stand still. We will continue to move forward. We will continue to march, and this bill shall go forward. Keep the power. Keep the faith. Keep moving. Keep marching. God bless you all.
Thank you so, so much. Let's give them another round of applause, you all. This is the very piece of legislation that just passed in the House, and we got to get it through the Senate. You've got to call your local senator. You've got to call your Senate office. Are heard. So next, we're going to have a former mayor join us. Shirley Franklin.
Wow. Keep on marching. It's our time. You know, every generation is obligated to take the baton. Every generation is obligated to take the baton. We stand on the shoulders of people who sacrificed, who gave up jobs, who gave up their lives that we would have the right to vote right here in Georgia. We stand on sacred land right here, right now, in downtown Atlanta on Auburn Avenue. So I don't have a lot to say, because everyone who is here and within the sound of my voice knows that the fight is worth it. It is worth it if we want our children to be educated. It is worth it if we want decent wages. It is worth it if we want health care. It is worth it if we want a level playing field that we might compete based on our interests and our talents. And it doesn't come easy. It's not going to be handed to us. The reason we're here is because we know we have to fight and adopt all of the legitimate, honest, ethical standards that allow this country to move forward. It will not move forward without you. Everybody here has to say, I'm not waiting for anyone else to tell me what to do. Our job is to recruit, engage, and retain the kind of energy that we have seen in Georgia in 2020 and 2021. So my question is very simple. Are you in? Can we count on you? What are you going to do? Not what is somebody else going to do. What are you going to do to preserve the democracy you, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and generations to come deserve? Pass the Voting Rights Act. Hold political appointees accountable. Hold elected officials accountable. And just a side note on that, folks say to me, well, I said, let me tell you, I didn't remember anybody being quiet when I was mayor. If I stepped out of line, there was a whole lot of people telling me to get back in line. So you got to hold elected officials accountable. But most importantly today, we must support voting rights. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you so much, former Mayor Shirley Franklin. So glad to have you. Thank you for your message and your continued servant leadership. So now we're going to have some more voices from the youth, the future that we have to look forward to. We're going to be joined on stage. Royce, come on stage, representing future coalitions. We had some powerful messages this morning, but that means we need even more powerful messages this afternoon. So give them a round of applause. It's all you.
Let's rise up. Let's rise up with those overlooked and undervalued by society. The black man who walks down the street on the way to his job, it's his first day as an 8th grade English teacher. The same man who has a son, his most prized possession, who told that son that life will be hard, but anything is possible. The black man who walks down the street on the way to his job only to pass a white woman clutching her purse a little too tightly. Let's rise up with the boy labeled girl at birth. The boy who always wore dresses that never felt right. You see, no matter the size, they always seemed too tight. The boy with the parents that claimed to love their daughter but then disowned their son. Let's rise up with the Muslim woman who works for the Justice Department only to experience injustice every time she wears a hijab. Let's rise up and lend a hand to the boy who can't. The boy who sits in a wheelchair watching the other kids play basketball. The boy who becomes the only one in his class to win an Olympic gold medal. Let's rise up with the woman who was born in the U.S., whose parents are Dominican and whose son is all-American. So why is she repeatedly told to go back to Mexico? Let's even rise up with the poor white boy. The one who is told he is privileged but doesn't feel that way, and yes, this boy does exist. The boy who talks about the pool his family doesn't have and wears the shoes his mother can't afford. He was given everything right, so it must be his fault. Right, wrong, because as one YouTube commenter said, life can be hard if you're white, but life will never be hard because you are white. Let's rise up with the woman who crossed the border in her mother's arms when she was 3. In search of the American dream and nightmares, what is too often seemed to be, nevertheless, she persisted and earned a college degree. Let's rise up with the young Native American poet. She speaks wisdom, but no one listens. The poet who should be up here right now, the poet who instead has to hear a white boy speak of her struggle and triumph. Let's rise up. Because once we do, that glass ceiling will be in reach, and trust me, it is breakable. Once we do, we will be able to see over any wall, no matter who pays for it. Let's rise up. Because just wait is never a valid response to injustice, because inequality thrives at the sight of a head turned away, because ahead is the only way we can afford to go, because bystanders are never innocent in the face of oppression. Let's rise up. Let's rise up out of the comfort of our own homes, from behind our screens of privilege, because 140 characters cannot defeat hatred. Let's rise up to our elected officials, from the streets to the ballot box where change has for centuries been born. Let's rise up. Because if we don't, who will? If we don't, who will? If we don't, no one will. We must have the will to fight. Martin dreamt and he woke up the world. Rosa sat when it meant taking a stand. Barack ran to continue the fight. Now is the time to rise up together as one. To rise up over the filibuster, over McConnell, Manchin, and all who stand in our way. Let's rise up to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Because as Dr. King reminded us, in the fight for justice, wait has almost always meant never. And that justice too long delayed is justice denied. It has been far, far too long. Which is why we are here today to tell Joe Biden and the U.S. Senate that the wait is over. We demand the right to vote. We demand it unconditionally for all, and we demand it now. Thank you all. My name is Royce Carter-Mann. I'm proud to be a lifelong Atlantan, a lifelong resident of the 5th Congressional District, and I'm running to be your next representative on the Atlanta Board of Education, because students deserve a voice, because students have been leading the fight for justice for generations, and it's time that we listen to young folks. Thank you.
Royce, thank you so much. Thank you for your powerful words. Appreciate you, brother, really, really do. All right, everyone, we're gonna keep this moving. We've got another voice here representing the youth, but also representing National Action Network. He flew all the way here to be able to speak with us today. So let's give him a round of applause. We have Falibi Dosa.
Good morning, Atlanta. Come on now, y'all got some more energy. Good morning, Atlanta. That's more like it. That's more like it. My name is Felivi Dos. I'm a sophomore international business major at Morehouse College. I'm from Harlem, New York City, and I'm the NAN Youth in College Georgia State leader. You know, today many people ask me, why was it so important for me to speak in Atlanta and not DC? Well, there was many reasons. For one, this would be my new home for 3 years while I continue my education at Morehouse. Another, my great alumnus, Martin Luther King, always said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And as you've seen the kind of hatred they've had in Georgia, especially with one of the laws of just saying, if you have water and you're on the line, you cannot pass it, to me is extreme. So you see, I wasn't born here. I was born in my home country, Togo, West Africa. And the voting rights there is just even worse. The elders in my village have stand in lines for hours and hours just to think that if we vote for a different person, it will change. But it's a dictatorship. We've had the same president for years and years. His father has had the legacy years before. So for me, coming to this country, I understand the value of voting. I understand that the way that I'm actually able to vote, it can actually impact change. And we've seen here in Georgia, you have actual power. With the great work from my Spelman sister, Stacey Abrams, Georgia was able to turn blue. Georgia elected Biden into office. Georgia elected our first black VP, Kamala Harris. Georgia elected the 2 Democratic senators. Georgia was able to elect Reverend Warnock. Do you understand the type of power that Georgia has? The way how we was able to dramatically impact the political game. That was the power that you all had when you stand on those lines to go out and vote. When you stand out there for hours making sure that you was gonna make sure your vote matters. That's real power. That's why I'm encouraging we have to pass the John Lewis voting rights bill. Because they understand that the power that we have and want to make sure that they can diminish it. But let's make sure that doesn't work. but I also want to specifically challenge the young folks. Young folks that are sitting down, let's make sure we get up. Because if you look in history, a lot of times, not to diminish the older folks that was outside, but the young folks were still outside too, making sure that we was able to do some good trouble. Can we say that one time? Good trouble. Say it again, good trouble. Exactly, that's what we had to make sure we do. Thank you so much, Atlanta. My name is Felipe Dosa, and I'm very honored and happy that I'm able to serve you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You did incredible. Let's give them another round of applause, you all. We've got to encourage our youth because they are really taking us into the future. They're making sure that the fight is not lost, that the fight continues. Right now, we have an incredible speaker coming up. We have Representative Donna McLeod, who's going to share an incredible message with us today. Give her a round of applause.
Big up! Big up! So you guys, most of you guys know that I was born in the island of Jamaica. I'm the first Jamaican born to serve in the Georgia House of Representatives. And I know a little something about fighting. And so let me tell you guys, first of all, voting is everything. Without the right to vote, you have nothing. I became a citizen for that very right. I had a green card, but the only thing I didn't have was the right to vote. Because knowledge is the most powerful thing you give to yourself. But the vote is the most powerful thing we give to each other. And so the vote and fighting for it is something that we cannot stop doing. So we must fight on. They must pass H.R. 4. They must pass S1, which is For the People's Act. And let me tell you something. There's nothing we can't do together because the power is in our strength. Let's get this done. Congress, we're calling on you. Get the job done now. Thank you, guys.
All right, you all. I'm sorry, I didn't hear enough noise. Who's representing the islands tonight? Okay, that's all right. We'll take that. We'll take that. Thank you so much, Representative Donna McLeod. So next, we have an incredible leader. We are so excited to have her here with us. We have Janine Abrams, Mclean here. Let's give her a shout out, give her some love. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? I'm Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean. I am the vice president of an organization called Fair Count. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that was founded by my sister, Stacey Abrams. And I'll tell you, she sends her regrets that she couldn't be here today. One of the reasons Stacey founded Fair Count was to make sure that everybody was counted in the census. So y'all probably heard us telling everybody to be counted in the census, and we got the results back. They were delayed because of COVID, but we got the results back. And the reason that we did that is because we knew that the census was going to be the seat and the source of the power for the communities that we work in. If you look up here right now, it says to protect your power. So we know that there are 3 pillars of our democracy. You have the census, you have voting, which we're all here to talk about today, and what you've heard all these powerful speakers talk about. But there's another part of it that you haven't heard people talk about, and it's the non-sexy friend that nobody wants to pay attention to. But that 3rd pillar is redistricting. Redistricting is how we draw the lines so that the people have the power to pick their elected officials and not the other way around. What we have seen over and over, decade after decade, is that politicians, elected officials, draw the lines in ways that they are allowed to choose their voters, and that is not the way that it's supposed to work. When you are engaged in the redistricting process, when you make sure that your community is heard, when you make sure that the needs of your community are heard, that's how you protect your power, that's how you gain your power and keep your power. So you're going to hear a lot of people in the news. The Georgia legislature is working right now to draw the district lines, but everybody's going to be talking about congressional lines and how do we elect congressional officials. They're going to be talking about state representatives. How do we elect them? But that redistricting, that power goes all the way to the local level. When you make your voice heard, and you tell the elected officials that we draw the lines, then you are not only drawing lines for congressional districts, you're drawing lines for your voting districts, your county commissioners, your school boards, your mayors, all of that. And so we have to be engaged in this redistricting process. And like I said, we know that it's not the sexiest thing, but it is one of the most important things that we can be doing today. So if you want to learn more about how you can protect your vote, protect your power, make sure that you choose who you want to represent you, then you go to faircount.org and we can tell you all about redistricting and how you can get involved and how you can make sure that your community's voices are heard. So I'm just going to say one thing. If you can repeat after me. When I say who draws the lines, you say we draw the lines. So who draws the lines? I said who draws the lines? Who draws the lines? And we're going to draw them for every single district in the state of Georgia. Thank you, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janine Abrams Mclean. Let's give her another round of applause. That family is doing everything they can to make sure that we have a fair fight, that we have a fighting chance. And we're going to keep this going because I am so honored to be able to introduce our next speaker. We have Dr. Bernice King joining us today. We're sitting right in front of the historical Martin Luther King Center. Please give a round of applause for the CEO of the King Center, Dr. Bernice King.
Good afternoon, everybody. 58 years ago, my father delivered his now iconic I Have a Dream speech. He reminded this nation of its obligations to deliver on its promise of freedom and justice for its black citizens. He reminded us of the fierce urgency of now and that this was no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Although the Voting Rights Act was signed into law 2 years later, as a result of pressure from we, the people, who would have ever thought that 50 plus years later we would still be fighting for the protection of voting rights and equal access to the ballot. This time, though, we are not just fighting for voting rights, we are fighting to literally save our democracy from those who would attempt to root our nation in the oppressive weeds of yesterday through a new generation of Jim Crow voting laws. Rather than sowing seeds to provide democracy, the greatest chance to grow today and prevail tomorrow, state legislators across this nation are attempting to transport us back to the shameful period of American history when mass voter suppression for the black community was the law of the land. Only this time, the impact has far-reaching effects on all communities of color, rural communities, economically marginalized communities, and young voters. On this, the 58th anniversary of the March on Washington, and my father's I Have a Dream speech, it is a tragedy that our nation still embraces exclusion and tolerates disenfranchisement. What has and is being done in the name of voting disregards and disrespects the tireless work of my father and so many other people. It jeopardizes the soul of our nation and the promise of democracy. We are in a state of emergency, and it will be fatal for the nation, just as my father said in '63, to overlook the urgency of this critical moment around voting rights. Therefore, I'm here today because I care about the life of our democracy and our humanity. I'm here because there's a major assault on the crown of my father's life work, voting rights. I'm here because many state legislative halls of the South still have those whose lips drip with the words of interposition and nullification. And I'm here because we are in the fight of our lifetime, and justice is still lying prostrate on the floor of too many Senate houses across this country and on the floor of our U.S. Senate. And we must resuscitate it through strong, aggressive, moral, and courageous leadership from our president Vice President, and members of the Senate who are determined to pass voter legislation, even if it means abolishing the filibuster to save our democracy in this hour. As my father said, there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he or she must take that position because conscience tells them it is right. Therefore, we say to our Senate that voting rights is not an ephemeral, evanescent domestic issue that can be kicked about by reactionary guardians of the status quo. It is rather an eternal moral issue which may well determine the destiny of our nation. The hour is late. The clock of destiny is ticking out, and we must act now before it's too late. The most significant threat to our democracy is principled men and women's voices remaining silent on this issue and failing to yield to conscience by standing against laws that restrict access to voting. As freedom-loving people who are gathered here today and all across this nation, we refuse to be silent or silenced by anyone or any means. No democracy or truth-seeking individual, and I must say even corporation in this country, should silence their conscience when injustice rears its ugly head, because justice and righteousness is everybody's business. And all freedom-loving people must let their dissatisfaction be known. So we can never be satisfied. As long as voting rights continues to be a political football in the hands of men and women who utilize their legislative powers to write and pass laws that restrict and streamline free access to the ballot, we can never be satisfied. As long as our democracy is under threat by those who feel that their election to office grants them the right to remove power from state elected officials and local election boards to determine the outcomes of elections and substitute the counting of one person, one vote with the decision of a legislative body. We cannot be satisfied as long as black and brown and young and impoverished people are targets of political operatives. We cannot be satisfied, and we won't be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Therefore, we call on our corporate, our faith, our civic, our entertainment communities to use your influence to retire propagandized politics in the state legislators across this nation and apply pressure on President Biden, Vice President Harris, and members of the Senate so that we can get passed and signed into law the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act and For the People Act. Yes, it was a win for democracy when people turned out in record numbers in a pandemic to vote. Yet those who love power more than justice got a little bit nervous and started organizing around a twisted lie and began casting it as a truth. But I ask you, how can they pledge allegiance to a nation which stands as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, and yet under the guise of making it easier to vote but hard to cheat, make a mockery of God by using divisible means to perpetuate an unjust status quo? Be assured, though, as my father said, evil cannot permanently organize, for it bears within its seeds of its own destruction. Be assured, as Carlyle said, no lie can live forever. Be assured that truth crushed to the earth will rise again. For as James Russell Lowell reminds us, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold always sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. We shall prevail over voter suppression, and our democracy shall live because the God of justice is with us. Now, it may seem that we are in a very dark and difficult and dismal hour around voting rights. But as my mother used to always remind me, baby, the darkest hour is always before the dawn. If we continue to raise our voices in a coordinated fashion, applying all-out pressure on our president, our vice president, Senators Manchin, Senator Sinema, as well as members of the Senate, daybreak will come. How can I feel assured? Well, in November of 1956, the city officials in Montgomery brought a legal action to shut down the carpool that was the alternate form of transportation during the Montgomery bus boycott. My father and the rest of the leaders of the boycott had no backup plans to support the boycotters if the court ruled against them. Their backs were against the wall. They didn't know where to turn. Things were looking bad in the court hearing, and it was a very, very dark moment. But while sitting in the courtroom on a brief recess, there was suddenly a commotion. A reporter with the Associated Press brought a newspaper to my father, which revealed that the United States Supreme Court affirmed a decision of the U.S. District Court in declaring Alabama state and local laws requiring segregation on buses unconstitutional. So my beloved community, daybreak is on the horizon. So let's not wallow in the valley of despair, but let's keep the faith and walk together, children, and don't get weary. Organize and mobilize together, children. Don't get weary. Stand up nonviolently together, children, and don't get weary. If we got to fuss and fight, get over it together, children, and do not get weary. But let us not forget to pray together and be loved together, children, so we will not get weary. And one day we will all be able to say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last from voter suppression, free from injustice and inequity, free from lies and half-truths. In the meantime, let us continue the movement to pressure our president, our vice president, and members of Senate to pass and sign into law the John Lewis Voter Advancement Act and For the People Act. God bless you, and let's continue the movement.
Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2 3 4. Mic check 1 2 3 4. Mic check. Mic check. Are you gonna be standing next to her?
Will I be standing next to her? No, she will. But I'll give it to her.
Oh,
I got
no,
you.
I'll just wait till she gets up here. I just want to know who's gonna be. Okay.
I'll probably have her hold both of these because as soon as she's done with you guys, she's gonna have to go right back in there. You have to take her. But thank you for staying. I appreciate it. I hope you guys got any water. I am sorry. We're not the ones organizing this. I apologize. Nina, you want to hold this? You want to put this on, or do you want us to hold it for you? What would you rather?
Wiped down.
Huh?
Has it been wiped down?
That's why. Let me hold it for you.
Oh, they shoot up, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to keep this on my hand.
Let me put on my mask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Since I don't have mine. Hey,
There you go.
you need a new phone. I had to get a new one.
Is there?
You said you had
King is joking about my phone.
Yeah, you need to get a new one.
All righty.
Yeah, it's cracked.
It's very cracked.
All righty.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you all?
Good, good. Can you just reflect on, 58 years after, and we're still talking about voting rights. How are you reflecting on that?
You know, it's really frustrating that we're at this place. But in spite of that, I'm encouraged about the level of consciousness and coalition building that's happening around this nation, not just around voting rights, but issues of social justice in a way that I haven't seen it since my early adult life when we were dealing with apartheid. And so, although we're at this place and literally fighting for our democracy, as I said in my presentation, my mother said about the darkest hour being before the dawn, I know that daybreak will come in this issue because I see the energy and the focus and the concentration of people. And, you know, the more we keep pressure on, it's like if you keep applying pressure, and the more pressure that you put at a place, it begins to release something. And we don't know when, but it's going to happen. I mean, if my father and them had given up after, you know, the first assault in Montgomery or the second, you know, strategy where they tried to cripple them, what we have today, we wouldn't even have. So, you know, it is frustrating, but, you know, there's a contingency of people that are determined not to give up, you know, not to turn around, and we will prevail one day.
And you were able to gather a coalition of groups, not just focused on voter rights, but unions, groups that are focused on other issues. But why center the message on voting rights? How fundamental is that?
Well, I mean, because, you know, our democracy, it's the place where all of us participate in all of these things that affect our lives. I mean, if we have no say-so on what happens, you know, in terms of employment, you know, in terms of health care, you know, in terms of housing, you know, the environment, then we effectively don't have a democracy. And so voting rights is essential for all of the rest of these issues. It's the very heartbeat and the soul of who we are as the United States of America. And we have been a leading country in that regard. And so we have to fight for this and preserve this for the sake of the rest of the world. Because as goes America, goes the rest of the democratic societies.
Dr. King, you talked to me the other day about pressuring the administration. How soon do you hope to maybe entertain a meeting with the Biden administration to discuss the issues with them?
Well, you know, a lot of people have been meeting with them. I'm not sure my meeting will make that much of a difference. So I can't even, really answer that. What I can say is I'll keep using the means that I have and the connections that I have to let my voice and my concerns be heard in unison with the rest of the people who continue to meet. I think more importantly, we have to find a way, as I said, to maximize the pressure. If you have a senator like we do, we have 2 senators who support federal voter legislation. Even pressure on them to the point that they're like, okay, leave me alone, I'm working. They're working on the other senators because they're physically up there with them when they're in session. They're the ones that are going to have those sit-down conversations with Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema, and everything that the poor people's, I'm trying to get the formal name of Reverend Barbara's organization, everything that they're doing in West Virginia to bring pressure is so important. So we've got to start thinking about creative and new forms of civil disobedience. In '67, my father really talked about the fact that we were moving into new stages of civil disobedience in our society, and he encouraged it. And he said we may have to disrupt some things. We've seen attempts at that historically, when I say historically, in the last 10 years with young people. And we're going to have to be more strategic with where do we shut down to get people's attention, because too many people are still sleeping on this issue because they think it's just a black issue or a brown issue or just activists complaining. No, this is the lifeline of our very democracy, and what they think is black people today will affect them tomorrow. It's not like that saying, I don't know all the different communities, but when they came for one community and they came for another community, nobody ever, answered. And then by the time they came for you and your community, there was nobody there to speak up. And so this belongs to all of us. This is an inclusive issue. This is not a Republican, Democrat issue. This is an issue about justice. This is an issue about righteousness. And this is an issue about the lifeline of who we are as citizens of the United States of America and the globe.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Dr.
Any more questions? NBC, do you have any questions? CBS,
I got
none.
2 minutes.
Anybody else? Okay, then we're done. Thank you.
Brother.